Joining us now is Roland Butler. Normally somebody'd say no relations, but I'd be lying to you. Roland and I are first cousins. Our fathers were brothers. Roland, how you doing today?
I'm doing fine, Alan. How are you doing?
I'm all right. Roland was a captain of well, you did some charter boat captaining too, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, and now you're running around green because you're doing nuclear stuff?
That's correct.
What do you do exactly? I mean, I know after you gave up diving and all that, you went and did this nuke thing. What do you do?
Well, my title is a radiation protection technician. Basically, I'm in charge of supervising or overlooking, I should say, the workers as they work on around the nuclear reactor. I'm in charge of making sure that no contamination, radiologically speaking, goes beyond the boundary that I'm in charge of.
Now, out of curiosity, I mean, what made you go off onto that? And you started that up kind of late in life.
Well, as you said, I've been a boat captain for many, many, many years, and but frankly, I just simply got too old to do that. My auto accident caused some trauma that took quite a while for me to rehabilitate out of, and so I just thought it would be a good thing to try something totally different. Well, there's the nuclear field is definitely different from being a boat captain. And I succeeded in a tough curriculum activity, and so I don't mind people at my age going into this career field. So that's where I'm at.
You know, why do you think that's so? I mean, why don't they get kind of age discrimination over a 60-year-old guy starting out in a new field?
Well, first of all, as far as the age is concerned in the boating activity, it's a lot cheaper to bring people up when they're young and pay them a whole lot cheaper than me. So that ended that. But I think that there's a lot of folks that were in the nuclear industry that were just simply retiring, and it left a vacuum. And, of course, the nuclear industry had been a little slow, due to publicity, wrongfully thought of by the public. And so, consequently, there just has been a lapse of people working in the field. So, therefore, my age did not discriminate against me.
Well, now, the reason I've got Roland on here is, y'all know, my mom passed away a week ago yesterday. Roland and I, obviously, since we're first cousins, Roland grew up in the Fort Walton Beach, Destin, Florida area. And as you know, I grew up here in Atlanta. Roland's dad, my uncle, died when he was 59 years old. Roland and I were 22 at the time. He died in, 76, wasn't it, Roland?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, all right. So we were 22, and when Uncle Floyd died, Roland's dad, I mean, it had a profound effect on me, and I studied just about everything, read every kind of book that was out at the time, and since on the afterlife, near-death experiences. And Roland is one of several people I personally know that has been over to the other side and come back. And in light of, going through this with my mom, it's just something I want to think and talk about. So I hope y'all will indulge me. In fact, because of two people that I know, one being my father, that had this experience, and one being Roland. The last night of my mother's life, I was really curious who was going to come and greet her from the other side. So I talked to both of them, and I called Roland and I asked him, what were the sequence of events? Was there any chance of me seeing my relatives and that kind of thing? And so I thought y'all'd find this interesting. Now, Roland, you don't know some of the people I've interviewed on this subject. About a little over a year ago, I interviewed the guy out in Texas who had died and gone to hell and came back. And he's since been doing interviews on the topic. I did another interview maybe 2 years ago with a neurosurgeon who was agnostic and was in the camp that, these were just simply the hallucinations by an oxygen-deprived brain and stuff like that until he'd actually had his own near-death experience, and then he wrote a book about it. And obviously now he is a believer, and I certainly have. I mean, when my dad shared his story with me, golly, it's hard to believe, 40 years ago, you kind of get to thinking about it. Roland, could we start with the night of your accident? Tell me exactly what happened to you.
Well, I was driving for another boating excursion as captain in Louisiana. I was on the Interstate I-10 going eastbound on the interstate through Alabama, and my cruise control stuck. I was quite awake, and I tried to disengage the cruise control because it was accelerating. And as I was trying to break it to disconnect it, a car hit me from behind at my left rear bumper. That initial strike projected my truck that I was driving to the shoulder of the interstate, and this is where I met the first 18-wheeler. This big truck was just broken down on the side of the road. And when I impacted this rig, I was moving about 109 miles an hour, so the police told me. I hit it at a slight angle now on the front of my truck. And, of course, the right front corner of the truck struck first and stopped my forward motion completely. So I went from 109 to 0 in a second. And then the initial strike projected me back into the lane of traffic where a second 18-wheeler hit me. And at that point, I flipped over. And that's where this event really took shape for me. And it's been a long time, Alan, since I've been able to talk about this. So I want to apologize to the listening public if I have some trouble with this subject. Okay.
Yeah, well, sure. If you get choked up, just it's totally understandable. All right. So you had two different tractor-trailer trucks hit you?
I hit the first tractor-trailer rig that he broke it down on the shoulder, and the second one hit me from sideways and flipped my truck over in the middle of the highway.
All right.
So it was two impacts.
Okay, two impacts, and then... I mean, when did you realize you'd been in an accident, or was it one of these slow motion things that seemed to take forever? I mean, tell me about the.
Yeah, even after the initial impact, time was just going so slow, and it really didn't dawn on me what was going on until I had, I guess, what I would call, or what some people would call, an out-of-body experience. This was the part, Alan, that was very hard for me to talk about it. For a couple of years, I wouldn't talk about it. But anyway, the initial impact instantly pulverized my pelvis, and because the steering column had collapsed over my lower torso, and so there was indeed some severe head trauma from the initial impact. But it all came into focus, Alan, when I realized that I was in extreme pain, and I could hear voices coming to the truck to help me. That's when, Alan, I had this out-of-body experience, I guess you would call it. The whole thing was surreal to me. I mean, I began to visually experience an activity that appeared shockingly surreal. These events that I was witnessing was not from my own eyes, but from another sense located around my body somewhere, above my body. Both of these visual and audio events appeared to unfold before me as if I was above looking down at this victim, at this body that I wasn't aware of who it was. And
all right.
The person...
Well, let me just ask you this. I mean, I know from others, did you feel yourself coming up out of your body? I mean, when your soul came out, I mean, was it from the head out? I mean, that's what I've been told before.
You mean on the initial?
Yeah, when your spirit left your body. I mean, was it like coming out through the top of your head, or I mean, when did you become aware that your spirit?
No. I mean, I became aware of it when I simply became apparent that I was involved in some accident, and I was not really sure where I was until I looked around, and I was looking at this lifeless, unrecognizable human that was in the car. And I was basically looking down from the top of my car down into this person that was laying between the seats, and it was the lower half of this person's body was crushed under the dashboard, and his body was laying between the two seats, with his upper half was in the back seat, basically twisted, badly twisted. I could see his bloody face. I couldn't recognize him because of that. I had no idea who this person was, Alan. I mean, his face was unrecognizable to me. This body was bleeding, blood streaming from his mouth and forehead. There was so much blood, Alan. I just knew that I was looking at a dead person, and but I didn't equate it to be me, until somebody, I presume one of the EMS people, came in and wiped the blood away from this person's face. That's when I became aware that this bloody person that looked lifeless was me. That's when it became very clear that I was not where I thought that I would be. I was somewhere else.
How long were you floating around before you realized it was you?
Well, Alan, the timeline for these events, it's hard for me to isolate them, because I mean things happen in just real quick moments. But for me, it was just a long period of time. I mean, it wasn't like it's hard for me to define the timing of this thing, but it was fairly quick. Because I think the longest part of it was when I became aware that I was looking at me from absentia, and that's when everything really slowed down. Even though in reality, I'm sure it was just seconds of all this stuff happening, but for me, time stopped still, and that's when I had to start gathering up what was happening to me, because I was still rather self-aware. I guess if you're asking what events happened immediately after that told me that I was not in my body, I was in different. I was taking a different look and different perspective at all this happening. That's when I would say that I passed over.
All right. Well, when you recognized it was you and realized that your spirit had left your body, I assume that your experience is identical to all the other ones I heard. You were out of your body, but you were aware of what was going on here in this world.
Correct.
You could hear what they were saying. You could see them working on you. And did you try to communicate? Like, no, I'm here, guys. I'm not dead.
Yeah. I did. I did. I mean, I could hear these people trying to pull me out of the wreck. They had to cut the car a portion away so they could clear me out. I could hear them speaking. I mean, I could hear them. One of the EMTs wiped the blood off my face. I could see him touch my neck. I was assuming he was trying to get a pulse. And I could hear him talking to the other people outside. And yeah, I tried to I mean, like on the initial audio that I was hearing was this gentleman saying, I have nothing, no response. And I said, I'm here. I can hear you loud and clear. I'm not dead. And But, of course, they couldn't hear me. I saw them, Alan, do CPR on me. I later understood that they were trying to obtain some kind of a basic heart rhythm, such that they could, they could correct it by using the defibrillators, which is what they did. But I could see them doing that, and I could see them pulling me out, and I could see them. And once again, this is from some perspective about me, and I saw them crouched over, working on me on the pavement. The ambulance crew chose not to take me back because they didn't think that I would survive the trip back in the ambulance. They did call Life Flight. They came in, and those are the ones who took charge of Life Flight EMS people, and I could see them hooking me up with some tubing. I saw they were putting they're ventilating me with oxygen. They had me hooked up, monitoring my heartbeat. And when they stopped the CPR work, that's when they went ahead and chopped me, I call it.
What do you mean chopped you? Oh, with the helicopter?
No, they used the defibrillators on my heart. With the two.
Oh, shocked you. I got you.
They shocked me, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And, and I know, and once again, I was looking at this as if I was someone who was just watching from absentia, someone who was just watching all of the stuff take place. Although I knew it was my body. On the initial strike, I call it, the electrical shock strike, I saw my body twinge. And by the way, all this time was without pain. Now, it was when I was still I felt the pain when I was still inside my body. It was horrible. But then when they shocked me, I didn't have one of those convulsive-looking experiences like you see on TV, where they give you a shock and the body jumps up and all that stuff. And it wasn't like that at all. I mean, there was definitely some convulsing, but there wasn't anything quite that pronounced. So basically, at this moment, Alan, I then started to drift away. And the next thing, my vision just left what was going on down here. And that's when I noticed it was just pure darkness all around me. And I know I was very much self-aware of my surroundings. I just didn't see anything. It was dark. Until, bear with me for just 1 second. Then I noticed, Alan, that I was facing a light. It wasn't one of these light at the end of the tunnel deal here. I was not confined by any boundaries. It was just like outer space, I guess would be a better way of putting it, that most people could understand. But I did see a light. It was a dot. It was a sun, but it was so far away from me. And it was well defined because it was surrounded by the backdrop of pure dark. I felt like I was not alone. I felt like I was being directed to the light because it was getting brighter. And there was a point where it became so intensely bright that I could still see into the light. It's hard for me to explain it, but it became so light, so bright. It was all around me at this point. That's how close I was at the light. And it was as if it was shining through my body. But yet again, my eyes, I had no trouble seeing. Are you with me?
I'm with you. Go ahead.
All right.
I think it's important to back up for a second. I mean, they tarped your car and pretty much declared you dead during this before you drifted away, right?
That's correct. I'm not sure how long it took for them to get a rhythm after they used the defibrillators on me. I'm not sure how long it took. I was told by my neurosurgeon that I had no brain damage that they could ascertain. I mean, I wasn't without oxygen for minutes and minutes, but I don't know how long it took for them to get my heart back into rhythm. I don't know the answer to that question. But yes, I knew I was dead. And they were working hard to revive me.
Before we get back to the light,
Yeah.
when you recognized that you were dead, I mean, what was that like? Were you scared? I mean, nervous? I mean, what's it like when you go, hey, wait a minute, this guy just threw a tarp over me and said I'm dead? Well, I mean, what was that?
Well, I mean, it was, again, it was so surreal by looking at this shot of a parent that became me that I was numb to the whole thing. And, but yeah, I knew that I wasn't the person that they were working on. I was somewhere else now. I wasn't down there inside this broken, bloody body. And yes, I knew that I was dead. In fact, when it turned to complete darkness, before this bright light, this pinpoint light became rather apparent, I thought I had to be dead. I said, I was paying the ultimate price for all the sins that I'd made down here. I just knew that this was it. All the wrong decisions that I made in my life was all coming down to this. And I was paying for it because it was complete darkness. Okay?
All right. So they throw the tarp on you. Things kind of fade to black. And I remember you.
Well, they didn't throw a sheet over me. They were working on me. What they initially did, I understand, was they threw a tarpaulin over the truck. I presume they were still working on me, but I saw the darkness around the outside of the vehicle. So I presume if there was something being thrown over there, I was told it was the tarp. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
But I didn't have anything. I had no sheet thrown over my head because I didn't watch myself that long, Alan. I mean, I was still apparently watching them working on me, but it became very dark. And that's when it became dark, I just knew that I was dead. I was somewhere else, but I wasn't down on this planet at that moment. Does that make sense?
It does. All right. So
okay.
We fade to black. You look away, and there's the light. Now, some people, I mean, have talked about, they hear music or choir or, there's some sound associated with this. Was there any sound for you?
No, there was not. I felt like I was not alone. This is before I saw other images. But no, I didn't hear any music.
All right. So you're looking down the valley of the shadow of death, across the great sea, through the tunnel, whatever. I mean, people describe it in different ways, but that this void that you're describing is very consistent, and the light on the other side of the void. Were your greeters there at that point, or tell me about the trip to the light?
Well, when I was surrounded by dark, and then I mentioned that there was a light. It wasn't like, again, I was in a tunnel. I was in no tunnel. I saw a light, and it was pinpoint, and it was off into the distance. But it became larger and larger because I just felt that something was moving me towards that light, which was good because I did not want to go back where I just left because that was undescribably painful. But during this time, Alan, where I was moving towards the light, and again, it was as bright as the sun, and it was getting larger. I guess during this time, I simply I felt warmth. There was no pain. I was at peace. I mean, there was no thought of ill will or sadness now, or fear or loneliness, particularly loneliness. I knew I was not alone. And as you mentioned before in this biblical passage, I guess, let's see if I can, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, and I fear no evil, for God is with me. in essence, Alan, that's what it was for me at that moment. I was not alone. I knew I was not alone. And also the light became very bright and very large. I was completely, at this moment, surrounded by light. Yet it was, again, as I mentioned before, it wasn't disturbing my vision. I could see into the light. And it was as if the light was so bright, it was just piercing my body. And
now, did you perceive that light moment to be God?
Yes, I did. Because this feeling of warmth that I mentioned before, and in the absence of pain and the absence of sadness and fear and all that stuff, that grew as I was getting closer to the light. And when the light finally was shining through me and was all around me, that was the essence of where I knew I wanted to be. I did not want to come back at that moment. But after that, I once again was shocked. That's when I had the two visions that I think I already spoke to you about.
All right. What he's referring to is my deceased Uncle Floyd and my cousin Mike, who had also passed away. Hell, how many years has it been since Mike died?
Say again, I'm sorry?
Time flies. How long ago did Mike die?
He was dead, I think, 2001.
Yeah, I'm going to digress for a moment. I had flown into Destin with my wife and my two kids. And we had gone over and met with Mike. And at that time, I was speculating because, I grew up going down there to Destin and hanging out with you guys. But, when they spot zone Destin and you got to the point where going over the Brooks Bridge? What's the first bridge? Yeah, well, when it got to taking an hour to get across that one bridge, I got to thinking, hell, I can sit in traffic in Atlanta. So we moved over to the east side of the state, but we kept hearing people talk, Destin, and, we were going down there in the late 50s. And so I thought, okay, maybe it's me. I better go back down there and make sure it's not me, because I was thinking about buying a place down there. And so Mike picked me up and took me all around, and we went to see where, where grandmother lived and by y'all's old house. And, we had a gay old time. Mike gave my son, Christopher, a shark's tooth, and Mike said, well, what do you think? And I said, Mike, buddy, the next time I come down here, I think it's going to be for a funeral. And about a week later, I was at his. But that's a different story. So that was 2001. Well, that sounds about right. So 2001, when you encountered Mike and Uncle Floyd, your dad,
yes.
Were you in the presence of the light?
Absolutely. Yes, I was.
Now, had Sherry died at that point, your sister?
Yes, she did.
Was she a greeter, or is it just?
No, she wasn't in my vision. And I was asked about that by my sister Sharon, who was very religious, and she was very interested in what I saw. And she asked me if she'd seen her daughter that had died.
Yeah, Michelle.
And all this before Michelle, that's correct. And Alan, the answer was no. I didn't see these other relatives of mine, my people, as I call them. No, I didn't see them. But that doesn't mean, I told Sharon, this does not mean that they weren't there. I think, Alan, that I was allowed to see what could be my future. Okay? I believe that what I was seeing...
Your future here or over there?
No, there. And so I was being allowed by the Almighty to see a short glimpse of what could be. Okay? And so just because I didn't see a multitude of people and all that, it's not because I went there. It's because I was there. And I was there for a short period of time. And I was being allowed by God to view what could be come.
All right. When you saw Mike and Uncle Floyd, were they younger versions of themselves? I've been told that before. or were the of course at 59?
No, they weren't younger versions of my dad and my brother. They were a healthy version. They weren't sick. They weren't lame, that kind of thing. But they were their age when they died. I mean, they weren't anything other than the way that they were, Alan, at their age, but when they were able to actually converse and talk and all that, I mean, they weren't crippled or anything like that. They looked just the age that they were when they left.
Were you able to communicate with them?
Yeah, I didn't say anything. I remember my father was keen to vision first. And, I mean, I couldn't see his entire body. I just saw his silhouette in his face. And that alone was shocking. That's when I knew that I was somewhere where I really wanted to remain. But I saw him, I heard him ask me a question. I mean, he said, "Hello, son." I know he said that. "Do you know where you are?" I remember him asking me that. And I said, "Yes, sir, I do believe I know where I'm at. I'm in heaven." And I believe him saying, yes, you are, but you're much more, you're in different, like, I have a hard time talking about this, this is difficult for me.
Well, we'll take a moment.
He mentioned "Hello, son." He mentioned, "Do you know where you are?" And I said, "Yes, I do believe I know where I'm at. I'm in heaven." And I remember him saying it's so much more than just one word to describe. But he said, "Yes, you are." He also, I know he asked me, "Alan, would you like to stay here?" And of course, I wanted to. I said, "Yeah." In fact, I thought I was going to remain there. But when I was listening to him now, I was very much still self-aware. And it was really, I really broke up in tears hearing him again, but tears of joy, not sadness. Anyway.
So, what about Mike? Did you communicate with him?
Well, yeah, I did. Before my dad left Vision, Alan, he once again told me that it's not time for me yet. I remember him saying that.
Your dad?
My dad said that. He said, "You're not done, and you have to go back." That was difficult for me, because I thought there I was with him, to remain with him, and the rest of the heaven as I just saw a short glimpse of. And then Mike came into view. And I remember Mike talking to me. And all I remember Mike telling me is that there's more for me to do down here, and I have unfinished business. And the last thing he said was, "We'll be waiting for you."
I wish I'd asked him where that damn silver was. Your dad, he's the one that got me interested in accumulating silver. Back in the right after I got out of high school, he told me to start going up to the bank and sifting through bags of $50 and getting out all the silver coins. The 90% silver coins, and like a good nephew, I did. But after he died, he had been accumulating a bunch of silver, but the SOB had been buying it in my name. I guess he didn't. Well, anyway, that was just always an inside joke. What in the hell Mike do with that silver? All right, well,
I don't know, but I know he didn't take it with him. That's one thing I know for sure.
Yeah,
no matter how much money that you make, okay, you can never take it with you.
All right.
You don't want it with you.
Well, let's talk about heaven for a minute. Is it just the light? I mean, tell me about heaven.
I know that there's more. As my dad told me that there was so much more.
So much more than you were seeing.
That's correct.
All right.
That's correct. And And I think the largest impression was a feeling of love. I was completely surrounded by it. And again, it was the absence of things that we look on down here on this perspective of Earth. We look on things as that we're doing pretty good if we have an absence of sadness or fear and pain and all that. But that's only that's a minor thing until you get to where you are actually in severe pain, and then you go to an environment where there's no pain, zero guilt, zero fear, no sadness. It's all of those things that you know that you're not here on Earth, Alan. When you feel the absence of those things, it makes life very miserable for us down here. They're totally absent where I was.
Well, I mean,
That's why I wanted.
You didn't know how miserable it was until you'd been over there, or you just been having a bad time that night?
No, I that and the fact that there was, I felt like I wasn't alone. I'd always feared, Alan, that I would. One of my biggest fears was I would die alone, and I wasn't alone there. I mean, it was. Besides just the light that was so bright, I felt like I was in the presence of God.
What about a life review? Did you have the life review?
Yeah, I did. Matter of fact, I did have a life review.
What others have told me is the life review isn't the judgment. The judgment day isn't you being judged by others, or God. It's you judging yourself and how what you did impacted other people. Was that your life?
Correct.
That your life review?
Yeah.
And it's not the big events. It's not the day you graduated from high school or when your kid was born. It's the minor encounters that you have with people, strangers, and things like that. Is that a fairly?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. And I knew that I didn't feel, Alan, like I was being judged at all. What I saw, and this is why all of these events could have taken place in a year's time, when in fact, it happened just in a flicker of a moment. So there's no sensation of time consumed here. But yeah, I knew that I was judging myself. I saw things that had happened in my life that can't be changed. There's some things that happened in my life that I didn't even think I would ever remember again. And they all weren't bad either. I mean, there was a lot of wonderful things, family, falling in love, all of that kind of thing.
That time you had to clean that mackerel up after that hurricane. Did you see that?
Yeah.
Just so the listeners will know, we were down there one time and we'd gone out shark fishing. That was one of our things. And there's some hurricane had come up. And, we had to scamper back in and then couldn't get back out to the boat for several days. And the bait fish we were using were rotted out. And poor Roland is the guy that had to get down there and clean that stuff out. Then his dad, who, when he went out, and he didn't come back till he was ready to come back. And I think even you got sick on that trip, didn't you?
I sure did.
Well, that was the time I got so sick, I kicked the door in going into the cabin.
Yeah.
And as I
recall, the worst part about that scene was he had me and Robert clean it up. We were always cleaning up difficult situations.
Yeah, I'll tell you what'd make a good interview was the time Robert rode that hurricane out in the Aquanaut.
Yes, he did.
All right, well,
we had some interesting.
Yeah, we got some funny stories too. All right, now, so your dad tells you you got to go back. You don't want to go back. Mike tells you, hey, we'll be here when you come back. Then what's the next thing? Boop, you're back in your body and you're hurting like hell? I mean, tell me about that.
Exactly. The next thing was going back into my body, as you said. And it was like being poured from a sieve. I mean, it was like being jammed into a body that I didn't want to come back to because it was extremely painful. And so beyond that, I ended up feeling the pain. And I knew at that moment that, no, I wasn't where I wanted to be. I wasn't where I just left. And I knew then, too, Alan, when I actually had left a real place. It wasn't some figment of my imagination or anything like that. I mean, it was a real, honest to God, no pun intended, was where I was and where I wanted to be and where I knew I was going to come back.
Well, what do you say to the people who claim that you had this experience because your brain had been deprived of oxygen, or that it was a hallucination? It didn't really happen.
Yeah, well, like I said, I was unable to talk about this for quite a while. But I had my neurosurgeon did tell me that he said, Bowen, you're not crazy. You're not suffering from brain damage. He said, you're very much, we've heard this all before. So, no, you're not insane. And only after I was reassured of the fact that I wasn't brain dead. I wasn't brain dead. And so my neurosurgeon had to talk me through that event where I really thought I was brain damaged. And he said, no, he's heard this before. He's heard it all before. In fact, the surgeon that was talking me through all of this, he was a flight surgeon during the Vietnam War. And he told me that he'd already heard all of these stories and that they're uncannily the same. I mean, it's like not all of these people that have had this experience, they all saw the same movie. They all read the same book. They're not all connected in some way. But all of these different people have had the basically the same type of experience that I had.
Roland, I talked to one person that told me when they were on the other side, a lot of the stuff that we can't figure out, where'd God come from, the Big Bang and all that knowledge is revealed to you. Now, they may forget it when they get back, but while they're there, it all makes sense. Did you experience that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I did have my all of my entire life flash in front of me. Now, I saw that, but I knew that I wasn't being judged by it. And so, I came back with all my preconceptions of things were all put into proper perspective for me. I wasn't overly religious prior to my accident, but I can tell you now that only God could have allowed this event to be shown to me. And only God could do the things that He's done. What
do you say to the atheists that say there is no God?
Well, I mean, I mean, it's their lives that they're the ones that are probably presumed to have some problems judging themselves. I don't know, and that's not up to me to decide. Everybody has their own self-will. They have the ability and wherewithal to make their own judgments of life and let them head towards what they want to do. It's so unfortunate that people can only see what happens down here in this environment, this perspective. They think this is it, and I feel so sorry for them because they're missing so much more. This is only a brief segment of time for them, for people. It is for me. Now, granted, I never want to. I never take for granted anything that I'm experiencing down here now. I mean, every day is a wonderful day. I wake up and I'm alive and I'm wonderful. I'm not the same Roland than I was before this accident. I'm different, and so much better way. So every life experience now for me is really joy. I enjoy waking up. I enjoy watching the wind blow and hear the birds and all that kind of stuff. It's wonderful.
Are you anxious to get back over there?
Yeah, I am, matter of fact. I mean, I'm enjoying everything here. I know that. And but yeah, that's where I want to be. And I mean, I'm but only when it's time for me to go. I don't. I guess what I'm trying to say, Alan, is I don't have a fear of death, of dying, because I know what happens after that.
Well, let me ask.
So I have no fear of it.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, since you saw my mother a couple times, you know, the one time when we thought she was going to recover, and then when we realized that she wasn't. I mean, did you think, oh, lucky girl, she's getting ready to go over there? I mean, what?
Yeah, I mean, I for myself felt sad because I was going to miss her. And but your mom also, I had written a little bit, a couple of pages about my experience, and I showed them to her before. She had some questions, Alan, for me a year ago. She and I would talk about this again, and then it was still hard for me to talk about it. That she asked some questions and I answered them for her. And so when we were together, we were sitting there alone. She was laying in bed and she was looking at me. I didn't have to communicate anything with her. She and I were just looking at each other, and I knew that she remembered those questions that she asked me a year ago, before her death. Yes, it's sad that she's gone, but yes, I'm also know for a fact that she's going to be she is happy then. She's happier than she's ever been before. She's in a place where she's always wanted to go, but couldn't quite understand what that was. A lot of people that aren't allowed to see what I saw, they don't really have a conception of it, unless they read in the book or watch some movie about heaven and that kind of thing. They don't really know. But she asked probing questions of me in the papers that I wrote about this experience. So I know for a fact she knew what was going to happen, and she was good with it. All right? I'm absolutely certain of that. And I'm certain that your Uncle Robert as well, your dad also, knows that. But he's asking some questions too.
I mean, he had his own, his own experience, but
yeah,
it was a combination of his experience and your dad dying that got me really interested in the subject. And you know this story. The listeners might not know it. I hope I can. I might have to pause a couple times, like Roland was doing. But the morning my Uncle Floyd died, Roland's dad, I felt compelled to call him and to tell him that I loved him. And I remember you telling me that when you pulled up to that house, to his house, I mean, he told you, hey, Alan called. And it was shortly after that aneurysm burst and he died.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was holding him in my arms, Alan, when he passed away.
Yeah, wasn't he down in the kitchen getting ready to make something to eat?
No, he was. He was bedroom.
Well, I remember you telling me he told you to get him pour him a bath or something. He wanted to get in the bathtub.
That's correct. That's correct.
Yeah, and I remember. He was in pain.
Oh yeah, he was in pain.
Well, I remember he had that big old bottle of Rolaids by his bed. And, he died of an abdominal aneurysm, and I guess he was eating Rolaids because this thing had been leaking in him for a while.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously, at that one point, he knew he knew what was going on. He didn't know why he was on it, but he knew where he was going. The last thing he told me was that he loved me. And that was it.
The last thing he told you was what?
He loved me. That was it. He was never a person that really spoke like that. And I don't think he ever told me he loved me before. And I think that was one of his nexus. That's one of the things that bothered him. He was never really able to convey that word love. It means so much to different people. he did mention that to me. And what a nice thing. His last words would be that.
Yeah, well, my niece, her last words she heard from my mother was that she loved her. My last words, I said, "Mom, how you doing?" And she said, "Hot." So that's the last word I ever got out of my mother. But I will tell you, the night before she died, sleeping, she was in that hospital bed in her room, and I slept in her bed next to her. And it was just something very peaceful about that night. I wouldn't have traded it for anything in the world.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, the night she died, I could have done without that. I mean, that death rattle was rough, and it was long. It was 8 hours of that. And it was gut-wrenching. I'd always thought that was a sound they made when you exhaled your last breath. I didn't realize that's the sound you made while you were dying, in those last few hours, when you've lost your reflexes to swallow and stuff like that. And I mean, that was rough. That was a rough last few hours.
Yes, I know it was.
But I felt like I'd accomplished something.
Yeah.
I felt like I got her home.
Yeah. It's amazing, Alan, that you that we down here have to go through some kind of a serious event that really brings home the truth.
Well, like I said,
perspective.
I felt like I had accomplished something. I felt like I got her home. I got her across the finish line.
Yeah.
And even though I'm going to miss her, I felt like I got her home.
Yeah, you did. Isn't that so wonderful, Alan?
Yeah, it is.
And like I told you before, that you're going to get to see her again.
Oh, I have no doubt.
You know that.
Yeah, I do. Hey, Roland, we've eaten up the hour.
Okay.
Hey, we've been speaking with my first cousin, Captain Roland Butler, formerly of Fort Walton, Destin Beach, Florida. And now you're what, Chattanooga?
Yep, Chattanooga.
All right, Roland, I appreciate it.
Okay, my friend. Give me a call tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll give you a holler. Good talking to you. You're listening to Butler on Business. I'm Alan Butler, and I'll see you in 6 minutes after the news.